Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Keys to a Successful Job Search. My name is Cindy Strobridge, Director of Employer Relations and Special Events for Mercer's Center for Career and Professional Development, and I'll be the moderator for today. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. The webinar is expected to last approximately 40 minutes, and questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, you may submit that in the Zoom group chat box. At this time, this presentation is also being recorded. You'll be able to view this recording later on our YouTube channel, and a link of the recording will be sent out to all of our participants. Now, I'd like to introduce my Mercer colleague, Kim Meredith.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so delighted that you've chosen to spend a little bit of your afternoon with us. I know that if you're joining us for this webinar, that your mind is on job searching, and sometimes that can feel a little bit overwhelming knowing what's ahead. And I know spring semester is typically thought of as job search season. And so I've got my great picture of our colleagues here, me and Cindy. We've worked together in the Center for Career and Professional Development a couple of years now. We are both Mercer alum, and we just couldn't be more pleased to have a moment to present on this job search topic for you today. So I'll share real quick. I've been working with job seekers here at Mercer University, the students that are enrolled, but also alumni who come back for services for about 14 years now. So I've seen a lot of job searching seasons come and go, a lot of trends come and go, and some that stay. Was here helping job seekers through the recession, which was not easy. I'm very, very glad to be able to present to you today the keys to a successful job search in a very good market for job seekers. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing I really want to talk about today is preparation and planning. Of course, I would say that I'm a career development professional, and I talk to folks often about career planning and the importance of having a plan. And so it's sometimes very easy to think, you know, I'm spinning so many plates here at Mercer trying to get my courses and my final exams done, and that of course can be a very heavy load, but sometimes that means students don't spend the time to prepare for their job search intentionally. So I want to just take this moment and pause and say, if you're getting ready to launch a a job search, let's take a moment to prepare and let's think about our plan. For example, what's your timeline? Okay. By when do you want to be hired? Let's go ahead and write that down. If you're graduating in May, for example, you want to land a new job, let's say your goal is by June 1st, you would likely not want to begin your job search on May 1st. You'd want to begin now. This is why we're holding this webinar in February, and I hope it's coming at a very good time for you to consider your search. And when we talk about job search throughout this webinar, we could really mean the job search for something temporary, maybe interim or stepping stone job, or you might be thinking about the big job that's post-graduation that will hopefully utilize your degree and help you, get into the field that you've been desiring to get into. So either way you want to think about job search, everything we're going to present today is applicable. I've got some numbers on the screen right now from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. In their 2018 benchmark survey, they said that an average of 38 days passes between the job posting date and the first interview, the time when they'll first call a candidate in for an interview. 38 days. So if you see a job posting and it's just been posted today or this week, that's a good idea for job seekers to understand that they're likely not going to hear back or hear anything for at least a month. And take a look at the job offer. An average number of days between the final interview and a job offer is 25 days. So we start to put these numbers together and we can only speculate. I want to tell you there's no amount of Googling or surveys that we can look at to get an absolute number of how long is it going to take for me to land a job. I honestly get asked that question a lot by job seekers. There's no way to know because there's so many variables that exist. But I would like you to consider that it can take up to 6 months. I have actually heard folks going over 6 months depending on if they are more in a niche industry or a niche job, or maybe their career advancing instead of launching. But do prepare yourself for anywhere between a 1 and 6 month search. Now, in that time, you're going to be very, very busy. And job searching, they say, is a job. And many folks will get started on the resume. They'll come into our office. It's the #1 reason why students come to the Center for Career and Professional Development, this resume review. Will you look at my resume? Will you help me enhance my resume? And we love that work, and we will be glad to help you with that. But I'd like to ask, just before you really get serious with launching the job search, what do you want to do next? And I want to emphasize the word next, because we don't want to get caught up in thinking about your entire work life. So many job seekers tend to feel a lot of pressure about their future and their dream job and all of these words that we hear out in the market, my ideal job, what I've always been looking for. Some of that stuff can put really undue pressure on you. And so I really want to break it down and have you think, what do I want to do next? And for you, that could just be the upcoming summer. What am I going to do this summer? If you're looking at the job search right now as your post-graduation plans, then simply think about, what do I want to do next? For example, in the next 3 years. You certainly made a choice to come to Mercer University, and you knew that that would be likely a 4-year commitment. So I think that's a good point to ponder, to consider, what do I want next? Thinking more short term. Most job seekers that I talk to have a little bit of trouble articulating what they want. So I have this slide here that says some common things that I hear. It says, I'll do anything. I'm just looking for a job in my field, or I just need a job. I'm open. They say these things to me almost every day. And I want to tell you that the job market does not respond to these nebulous type statements. I'll do anything, or I'm open. I'm glad you're open, and I'm glad you're looking for a job in your field. But what I'd like to have job seekers do is research and time for self-reflection and studying, so that you have an idea of what you want next. And I'm not trying to say that you can just want one thing. For example, maybe you have your first choice or your second choice, or just types of jobs. I want you to pause and do some reflection and think about how to articulate what you want. You're going to need that because you're going to be asked that question numerous times, maybe by parents or family members, friends, people who care about you. They care about your job search and how you're doing. So let's be able to articulate that. Again, most job seekers that I work with, they struggle. They struggle with knowing what's next. Maybe it's because they're in a major that is considered non-career specific. Take a psychology major or any of the liberal arts disciplines. Those are not career specific. Even if you're a business major, you have, the whole world at your fingertips. We've got to think about specifics in terms of work function and even work industry. Our Career Center staff are trained to help you think about that. And we have tools to help inform your search and give you some direction. These are certainly not the only things that we have, but I do want to call your attention to a tool called What Can I Do with This Major? What Can I Do with This Major is an external website that we've accessed for a few years that really takes over 100 of the most commonly seen majors and academic institutions and allows you to interact with the website and see lots of career choices, for example, psychology again, that relate to that discipline. Now, what I love about this site is that you are going to see the things that you would expect to see, maybe the things that are more obvious career paths, but I really especially point you to this tool to discover and unearth the paths you may not have known about, you may not have considered, and it links you to the professional associations that may be relevant to that discipline. And as soon as you start clicking on professional association websites, you begin to see what that career field is like. You can tell by what kinds of articles they're publishing, what their social media is looking like. And again, I can't stress enough that What Can I Do with This Major tool, again, it's on an external website. You're going to have to use the Mercer University Center for Career and Professional Development link that I have here, which is on our website under undergraduate students. You have to go through the Mercer domain to get to it because we do pay a subscription for this. But once you get out on this tool, I think it's really a launching pad for endless resources. So you won't wind up staying on What Can I Do with This Major? Maybe it'll stay open on your computer, but you're going to launch into, I think, an entire path of discovery thinking about careers related to your discipline. And who says you have to just click on your discipline? You can click on multiple disciplines, even if it's not your major. Do some exploration. In fact, I encourage you to click on at least 3. On the other side of this slide here is the AchieveWorks personality. It's a personality assessment that we like to give Mercerians. It just helps shed light on your personality preferences. So it's not a career assessment. It's not going to come out with a list of careers per se that are suitable for your interests, but rather your personality preferences. And it does help you make informed choices, especially as a job seeker who wants to be in preference as opposed to out of preference in their job. And that might mean to you being employed by an employer that suits your values and your styles of working and communicating and leading, as opposed to an environment that's out of preference for you. Of course, we're going to have more gratification if we know who we are. And again, this personality assessment, it doesn't know everything about you, but I think it's a great conversation starter, and it can shed light if you have not done that. These are free tools. The links to these live in your Handshake account as well, or I know also the AchieveWorks personality link is also housed in your My Mercer account. It's going to launch you to an external site, and we here in the Career Center will have access to your assessment results. These are just 2 things. Of course, our office is equipped with many other tools that could be useful and could be customizable to you if you come see us. We can certainly talk about that. So I'm going to get back to the job search and say, all right, now that we've paused and we've thought about what we want to do next, some ideas, you'll see on the screen that I have these targets. again, to emphasize the need to identify a target. So think about creating a list. This can be a list on your phone in your notes app. This can be a list in Excel. I don't really have a preference for where you keep your list, but let's start a list of discovery that allows you to identify some target jobs, like job titles, job functions, and even employer names. And like everybody, you have more than one choice, so you have the option to pursue maybe that main thing that seems like the quintessential job for your discipline and what you'd always thought you'd set out to do. And then, of course, a second choice and a third choice that are also in line with your interests and your values and your preferences. Let's conduct a job search that takes into consideration our desires, and we know we have more than one, but do write these things down. It will really drive your job search efforts and give focus to you even as you network, and we're going to talk about that. So I have this silly list here, 1 to 10, to really drive home the fact that I want you to make this list of these targets. Start today. So when we look at this slide here, I created this pie chart and I really gave it some thought. This is really the expertise and the experience that I have developed over the 14 years working with job seekers. The main thing now that I want to make sure you hear in today's webinar is that you must get away from your device. A lot of job seekers feel like they mostly are going to sit behind their screen and look at online postings and apply. Of course, you know that's how you have to submit your application materials in today's market. You're going to do plenty of that, but it's not the majority of how you should allocate your time. So take a look at the pie chart and see that in the blue, I have informational interviewing and networking. And I was very purposeful here with including informational interviewing. And there are so many things that can fall under the umbrella of the word networking. But if you might think of this blue section as get out and be with people, this could even be lunch with somebody back from your hometown or somebody in your network that you haven't seen for a while. As long as you're purposeful, and I don't mean having your hand out asking for a job each time, but purposeful in your networking and learning and asking people how they got into their career, what professional associations they have joined. Again, these conversations allow happenstance to happen in your career, and this is so important. And I think this might be a piece that people miss in their job search often. And if you look at the remaining parts of the pie, of course, the orange section, there's a large chunk there for applying, because we know that filling out the applications for employment take time. You have to be very thorough. You have to submit an error-free application for employment. There are sometimes many supplemental questions that you have to fill out, all accurately and well written. That can take time. So certainly that's a large portion of your time. And I want to direct your attention too here to this, I think it's mustard color researching category. I pulled that out here to emphasize that this might fluctuate with the gray area where you're sitting behind the screen and you're looking at online postings. Because in the very beginning of your job search, I think the researching piece of the pie, if you will, is larger at the beginning of a job search. Once you have really taken the time to articulate what you want, you've looked at the professional associations, you've looked at the industry and the field and the publications and such, and you have an idea that's very clear, I think that part will get smaller, and perhaps the gray part will grow as your job search matures and you get better at knowing yourself and what you're looking for. So I hope that's really clear. And I'm going to move to this next slide, which I want to just caution job seekers about. I know that we're all using our mobile device. I have mine in front of me. I have an iPad here. I have a smartphone. So do you. You may even be participating in today's webinar with your device as opposed to a desktop. So we're all on the go. And I know that job seekers are spending a significant amount of time applying for jobs on their mobile devices. Even Handshake has a mobile app, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But a little word of caution here. I looked at a 2018 Glassdoor economic research survey and discovered some recent findings after they surveyed and looked at the happenings of 12 million job seekers in August of 2018. And what they found was that mobile job seekers submit 53% fewer applications than non-mobile job seekers, and 80% longer to complete each application. Now, if you stop to think about that, it's interesting. Of course, it's going to take longer on a mobile device. We don't get access to a whole screen. We have to be careful about typing or swiping. It's just, it has more of a lengthy process. So just bear this in mind. I know you're going to spend a significant amount of time looking for jobs online on your mobile device, but the advice from Glassdoor Economic Research, one of the takeaways from their white paper that I recently accessed, was come back later. Save the jobs on your mobile device, email them to yourself, set reminders to apply later when you're in front of a computer. And this can reduce frustration and save time. And I'm even going to add, perhaps it allows you to fill out a few more applications than you might have actually completed. You see, because they can see how many applicants are actually completing the application process. And I think there's a lot that stays in there lingering. So just a little word of advice and caution as you proceed. There's nothing wrong with using a mobile device in your job search. Again, this is our technology world that we're in, and we're on the go. And many of us are in environments where our mobile device may be all we have access to during the day or whenever we're searching. So the next thing I want to talk about is your resume. I told you earlier, this is the #1 thing that students ask our help with. It's even the #1 thing that alumni come back and ask for help with when they're seeking promotions and advancement. So I'll spend just a few minutes talking about resume. I'm not going to do a deep dive into a resume building workshop. However, I'll tell you quickly, we recently did a wonderful resume writing webinar with a certified professional resume writer. The recorded webinar is on our YouTube channel. If you want to check that out, it does take a deep dive. But you know, your resume, it has one job only. Certainly can't get you the job, but it's supposed to make your phone ring. It's supposed to help you get calls for interviews. And if your phone's not ringing, you have to think twice about your strategy or your documents. Somehow something may be going wrong. So how do you make your phone ring? When the candidate pool and the competition, if you will, is very dense. This is an image meant to have you pause and think about the competition that you never see in the candidate pool. This is an image from an actual job fair some years ago. I can't remember when I found it, but it really, again, speaks to the number of people in a candidate pool that's possible that you never see and you never know about. So as you bear that in mind, I want you to know that a customized resume is the only way to compete. You must take the time to analyze the job description every single time you look at applying and really customize a resume. Generic resumes will not likely make your phone ring, and it will cause frustration. And we don't want you to get frustrated. So if you put the work in on the front end, then you're likely not to get as frustrated when it's time, and you'll have that phone ringing. And I love having my phone ring when Mercerians take the time to call me and say, hey, Miss Meredith, I've got an interview, I've got another interview, and it's wonderful. But that comes with the work you put in with your resume and your other marketing collateral. Because again, consider the competition. They may or may not know to customize their documents and marketing collateral. And when I say marketing collateral, that has to do with any of the media or documents that you're creating, even your business cards, your LinkedIn profile. Everything you're creating for your job search really needs to be a pretty honed message toward what you want and customized as best as possible. So I have this next slide here to kind of explain a little bit more about the candidate pool, how employers screen and select candidates for interviews. This is pretty interesting. I always tell job seekers there's 4 buckets, and the 4th one you see is really essentially the screened out pile. The folks that didn't make the cut, they'll never hear anything, and sometimes they will get the ultimate email that says that they did not fit the qualifications. But the remaining 3 buckets are the ones I want to focus on here. If you'll consider that an employer's job is to whittle that candidate pool down, to screen out as many candidates as possible so that they can get a workable size group, because we know that if there's 76 people in the applicant pool, and that's a pretty small number depending on what the opening is, but we know no more than 10 will actually get a lot of focus or consideration, much less being called in for the interview. These days, I think it's customary for about 5 people to get called in for an interview. If we're lucky, sometimes it's 3. So that being said, there's these 3 remaining buckets. In the qualified bucket, we have candidates, and you can see I've kind of got these ranked, if you can follow that. The 9th and 10th place, if you will, candidates. They're qualified candidates, and I had to keep them in the candidate pool. So I'm going to put them over here in this stack, and I'm going to take a deep look at their resume. Now there's this other stack in the middle called well-qualified candidates. These are the candidates ranked 6 through 8 out of the top 10. And these are really well-qualified candidates. They definitely caught my eye. I am going to take a deep dive on their resumes if I'm an employer and I'm selecting candidates for an interview. But who do you think I'm going to look at first? I'm going to look at the pile of the candidates, which may be only 1 candidate, maybe 3 candidates. I put here 1 through 5. In a good candidate pool that's rich with qualified candidates that are best qualified, you'll have 5. But these are the ones that are going to get the call first. The best qualified candidates get the call first. So if there's 5 candidates there, all 5 of them get the call, they get the invitation to the interview, and the candidates 6 through 10 never really hear, which can be very frustrating because they knew when they submitted their application for employment that they were very qualified and they felt pretty confident. So this is a visual and something to think about. Again, I'm trying to reinforce the message that a customized resume is the only way to go. If you are truly best qualified or well qualified, you can only put that forward to an employer in a document if you're taking the time to do your personal inventory with what you have to offer this employer. You've looked at their job description and you really know what they're looking for, and you can personally turn out what you have to offer in writing on that document that's highly customized to what they want. Only when you do that can you get in these piles for this consideration. The folks that are writing the generic resume or the one-size-fits-all and they're clicking submit and uploading the same resume again and again and again because it's the only one they've done or it's the only one they have on their phone, they're really going in the screened out bucket. And I want you to be mindful of this as you pursue a job search, because we want you to be successful. So along those lines, I want to share with you a tool that I have really, really enjoyed using. I have found it to be very useful for job seekers, and it's called JobScan, and it's a website, jobscan.co. It's not .com, so note that. It's a tool that gives job seekers an analysis of how well their resume is tailored for a particular job. So you literally can copy and paste the job announcement description in one box, copy and paste your resume in the other box and hit the scan button, and it's going to look at how well you matched the words, the frequency of the words, the keywords, and it's going to turn out a match rate for you to consider. Now, JobScan says that a well-qualified candidate is an 80% match or higher. You can see on the screen the example of 50%. And what I love about this is that the report will tell you some suggestions for how to further customize and tailor your resume. This is very useful, again, because you need to get the deep dive consideration from the hiring manager. You need to be in the best qualified or the well qualified bucket. So do consider JobScan. We have a resource category located in your Handshake account that discusses this and links you out to the external website called JobScan. If you wish, you can create your own account. I'll, of course, leave that at your own discretion and desire. Just do consider that site. So I'm going to move on to a frequent question I get asked. I think almost every Mercerian that comes in my office says, do I have to write a cover letter? I had somebody in my office just today who's attending a career fair this afternoon off campus, and this individual said, do I need to bring a cover letter? I get asked that all the time. And my answer is, it depends. It really does depend. Does the job posting that you are looking at say that it's required? If it says that it's required, then it's required. Of course, that part's easy. But if it does not indicate or have any mentions of a cover letter, or sometimes they might use the wording a letter of interest, if there's no mention of a letter, then it's not required. So how do you know what to do? Here's my advice. If you don't have time to put together a superior letter, maybe the job is closing tomorrow or in 2 days, and you're looking ahead at your calendar and you see how full it is, and you don't have time to do a highly customized letter that is really giving at least 3 very specific selling points that are aligned to that job announcement, you don't have time to put that together, or perhaps you're not the best writer. I have a hard time believing that, because I believe Mercerians are obviously very good writers, so do have faith in yourself in that regard. Usually it has to do with time. But if you can't do a superior letter and it's not required, I ask you to use discretion. It's better really not to turn in any letter than a letter that's mediocre or average, or especially a form letter, a generic letter that you're seeing online where you're lifting these phrases that we see that are overused. Those are just not helpful. So I'd like to discourage you from using those generic letters and form letter formats. Really sit down and, again, do that inventory. What do I have to offer? Sit down and articulate that in the body of the cover letter. And of course, if it's required, then you know it's required. But to get back to my hypothetical example with the career fair attendee that I saw today, if you're going to a career fair, they're really not needed. 50% of recruiters say they read cover letters, 50% say they don't. I really advise that it's really not worth your time if you're attending a career fair to do a cover letter. But it is worth your time to do a customized resume. And of course, you've heard that message already. So I want you to think about your interviews, because we're going to have our phone ringing if we're following this advice. We're going to get called to that first interview, and preparation is going to be really, really key. Again, the Mercer Center for Career and Professional Development, this is what we do. We are credentialed coaches and counselors and consultants who have been highly trained in career development, and we have years of practice. We interact with employers on a daily or weekly basis, so we hear what they're telling us. We hear what their pet peeves are. We hear the trends in interviewing, and we can help you prepare. It is going to be a good thing to prepare. Sometimes we don't get much notice. If we get a call for an interview and all of a sudden they want you tomorrow, then of course that doesn't leave you a lot of time. But that's why I'm putting this on your radar now, because you can start to do that preparation now. And I will shed light here. A little tip is the work that you're putting into the customized resume to each target job and each employer. That heavy lifting that you're doing on the front end is going to prepare you immensely for your interview, because it's helping you think ahead about what you have to offer. So your job when you go into that interview begins to be, hey, this is my opportunity to say how I can fit your qualifications and your company or agency or firm or institution, and really articulate the match and that you're a very strong candidate But going back to the moment when you don't have a lot of time to prepare, I don't have a slide on this, but I want you to take a note or just memorize that Big Interview is another tool that sits inside your Handshake account in the resources area. And it's a free tool, and Mercer subscribes to this for all Mercer students. So all you have to do is go out onto the Big Interview website, and again, you've got to use the link that's inside of Handshake, and the instructions are there. And you have to create your account with your Mercer email address. It is technology that allows video mock interviewing. And you can do that on your own with even 24 hours notice. You can do that in the middle of the night if you need to. It doesn't require that you have an appointment with us. And they have hundreds of questions for all kinds of job seekers, all kinds of industries, even internship seekers, even those who are seeking admission into grad school or professional school. So do check out Big Interview. And if you want to come sit down with us in an appointment and have that face-to-face interaction, we certainly can do the mock interview with you as well and go over the questions and help coach you along. And that is, again, what we love to do. So speaking about a little detail with interviews here, I want to make sure that after you've attended a job fair or had an interview, you must set yourself apart from the other candidates by doing a formal thank you within 1 to 2 business days of meeting with the interviewer. And that meeting could have been virtual, or that meeting could have been face-to-face. There's an example of a handwritten thank you, which is less and less customary, but I think still appreciated as long as it's formal in nature. And I have a very good example here. It has to be on plain stationery. It can't be on any type of greeting card. Plain stationery only and very formal in nature. And then on the right, I have the standard business letter format. And you can email that. And you can also still mail it. The post office still runs and will deliver your mail. And I think that does set you apart. If at any point you decide to use paper in your job search, I think, again, it's kind of coming back around where hiring managers may appreciate that, maybe even in addition to an email. Even if you email a thank you in the body of your email, please also use a formal tone, not casual or friendly, but formal business writing. So I've got a little to-do list here for you to consider for your job search. Obviously, number 1, get clarity on what you want next. Remember, we're using the word next. If you don't have that clarity yet, seek help, either self-driven help that you do some of the assessments at home in your own time, or help that you get from the Mercer Career Center. We're happy to do that with you, and that's why we're here. Make a list of target employers, job titles. Make sure that you're tracking that. And I always tell job seekers, you can always cross something off of your list if you discover it's not the best fit later, but put them on a list. You'll be surprised at how many career options you really have when you see the list. Do develop a customized resume for each target job. That will take some work. Again, a little bit of heavy lifting in the beginning will pay off. Write a customized and targeted cover letter every time, again, or don't do one if it's not required. And here's one tip that we haven't really taken a moment to talk about yet, but that's gather your references, which is a process. You know you're going to need references in your job search, and they have to be strong. So always ask permission to use someone in your job search. Don't assume because they like you or you have a pretty good relationship that they will serve as a reference. You always want to ask permission first. And you also want to sit down and talk to them a little bit about your job search so that they know your goals, maybe a little bit about what to expect, what types of employer may call them, what you're seeking. I love this dialogue because you're going to gather how strong of a reference this person really is going to be for you. And don't assume, again, that it's a strong reference because they like you. Let's make sure that they can articulate your strengths and they don't mind doing so. Number 6 says purchase interview attire. So this is important. Doesn't have to be brand new. There's lots of Dress for Success type nonprofits now that you can make use of, but do think intentionally about your interview attire. This is, again, in that preparation category. I think you can do this now, even if you're not fully launched in your job search yet. Take time to think about the industry and the interview attire that you're going to need. Of course, when in doubt, formal is best. Number 7, Google yourself and manage your online brand. We're going to talk about that. I've got a little slide on your social media and your brand management online here. That's very important. Create a professional basic voicemail greeting. If you're still using voicemail, make sure that it's formal in tone, because you know employers will be invited to call your phone as long as you're using your phone number. And please delete your ringback tone on your cell phones. Attend professional meetings, conferences, and career fairs. Remember the pie chart earlier that talked about getting out behind the device screen and being more with people in your job search than behind the screen. And of course, make an appointment with your Mercer CCPD staff. We're happy to help. Little quick slide on that formal interview attire that I mentioned. Here's a great showing of various styles. Perfectly fine for women to wear pantsuits or skirt suits. I get asked that question a lot. Just a dark conservative color is standard and customary in our business culture now. And I do recommend this formal interview attire for almost all industries. Of course, you can do your homework, and if you've been doing informational interviewing and you've been inside of a company, then you do have some inside knowledge of what they wear. You can always use that as a gauge too, but please do step it up from what you see people wearing on their daily jobs to a more formal level, because you want to represent yourself very well. The details matter in your job search. I can't say this enough. Dry cleaning and hair and nails and just personal grooming and taking that extra time to prepare, waking up early and making sure this is all attended to. Something we talk about a lot in our Career Center work is helping students know what a correct handshake is. So just take a look at the images here. And do note the difference between the correct handshake and the incorrect handshake. You don't want to shake somebody's fingers. You want to go all the way in for the whole hand. And you want to smile and make eye contact and introduce yourself. So this is just a good visual for what a business handshake looks like. And you don't want to be too firm, but you want to be firm enough. So maybe you might need to practice that with a friend and make sure that you've got that down. It does communicate a lot about your confidence in a job search, and I always recommend that you shake your interviewer's hand at the interview, and even if it's another person on the interview panel, you would also be shaking their hand as well. So digital dirt and online brand management. This is so important. I have an entire other slideshow if it's helpful, if anybody wants to contact us and request that. But you really want to make sure that everything you have online, even if you think you've hidden it with really secure privacy features and settings, I still want you to go through it, and I want you to clean it up, delete, maybe even unfriend or unconnect where necessary. Because remember, when you're in a job search, you are selling your service. You are hoping to get a paycheck for your service. So this is really a sales job. You are your CEO and you're responsible for your brand. And that, of course, has to do with how all that grooming, how you dress, all of those things are important. But so many candidates overlook how important their social media and their Google credibility is. So Google yourself, take that time to clean it up, make sure that what you're posting is worthy of being seen by an employer that has your next ideal job. What would you want them to see about you? So I've come to the part of our presentation now where I think I've hit most of the keys I wanted to share with you today, the keys for a successful job search. So last but certainly not least is Handshake. Handshake is an incredible tool. We got it in 2017. It is the nation's premier college career development platform. It's used by employers all over the world to source and find college talent for internships and jobs. but it's also how you interact with your own career development and your career development counselor or consultant here at Mercer. It's how you make appointments and know about what events are happening. I can't stress to you enough how important Handshake is. So if you've not activated your account or if you've not fully completed your profile, I want you to put that on your to-do list today or ASAP. Last slide for me, and then I'm going to turn it over to my good friend and colleague, Cindy. Just remember that job searching is a process, and be good to yourself. You know, when we get these emails that tell us we weren't selected, it can feel like a downer, but don't take it personal. You know, in business, we're making business decisions, and so do approach your job search as a business activity. We're looking for a mutually agreeable contract that suits us both, me and my employer. And so sometimes it's just not mutually agreeable, and that's okay. And so the other aspect of this is if it takes a little longer than you thought, it's okay. And put the emphasis on the quality of your job search, not the quantity. So I'm not looking for you to apply for 20 plus jobs a week, making yourself insane and tired and exhausted. I want you to take care of yourself again and put more emphasis on the heavy lifting so your documents and your marketing and your brand comes across superior. And I would be just fine if you put in for one a week at that level. So I emphasize quality over quantity and lots of self-care. I always tell my job seekers, you need to sit and design some boundaries. When are your days to job search? What are your hours to job search? This is time management. Mark it on a calendar, write it down. These are my working hours. Consider that your job search is now your part-time job and you're going to track your hours. So if you've identified 10 hours a week to job search, mark them down and keep them. If you've identified 20 hours a week, mark them down, what days you're going to do that job search, and keep them. But my point here in the boundary comment is to make sure you give yourself some days off from the job search. Again, it can be lengthy, can be a little bit frustrating, and it's a process. So we believe in taking care of you in this process, because when you're taking care of you, you can hit the scene in the interview feeling confident and strong like the candidate that we know you are. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you really just don't show up that strong. And it shows. So Cindy, I think that hits the last of my slides. I'm going to turn it back over to you if you are ready.
I am ready, Kim. Thank you so much. And thank you. That was a very excellent presentation, a lot of helpful tips and tools to make sure our students are successful in their job search process. At this time, we'll take any questions that you all may have. So please go ahead and type those into the chat box below or on your right-hand side. We'll stay here for a couple minutes to answer any questions, and then we'll end the webinar. Kim, to give folks maybe a couple more, 30 seconds or more, what is your biggest piece of advice for someone who is starting their job search process?
To know what they want next. I really spent a lot of time at the beginning.
You did.
My anecdotal remark, of course I haven't measured this, is just, 80 to 90% of the job seekers of all ages, of all career levels that I speak with, when I say, oh, great, I'm happy to help you with your job search, what are you looking for? There is a moment of pause. Most folks cannot articulate really what they're looking for next. The career advancers usually can. Obviously, they've been in a career field for a while and they're looking to advance in that same field. But again, just taking that time, and I know that we as human beings don't really like that thinking time, the reflection, but it's so important. And if you're an extrovert like me, you really like to talk out. And sometimes we have things rolling around in our head in terms of interests or ideas. that we haven't really spoken out loud about with anyone. And that's why I think the career coaching consultation appointments are so important, because that's what we're here to do. Take that pause at the beginning of your search and know how to articulate what you're looking for. And that may be taking some world of work exploration as well. And we're here to help you with that.
Great, thanks. We do have one question that has come in. How valuable are recruiting agencies like Randstad for job seekers? This person has received a call about 2 jobs last week, and it seems almost a too good to be true situation.
Well, I always love to say trust your gut whenever something seems too good to be true. It might be. So do proceed with caution with that insight that you already feel. But I do find Randstad specifically to be, very reputable and well known. They often attend our SHRM meetings, SHRM state and local meetings. So I see them, and I think they have a lot to offer candidates. And my last remark on that is, of course, proceed with caution using your own discernment. But why not? Those companies that have been around for a long time, if you're clear to communicate to them your qualification level and what you're looking for, and you have to be clear about that, then I think that's just diversifying your strategy. Sort of like you can't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So why not diversify and see what types of postings might exist? But do keep in mind that those agencies don't work for the job seeker. They work for the company that they're trying to place someone in. In that regard, they don't necessarily always have your best interest. Again, just use your discernment and your own caution.
Great. We'll give some people maybe another 20 seconds to type in a question, and then we'll conclude the webinar for today. Before we conclude, I do want to mention, as Kim has said multiple times, please reach out to the Center for Career and Professional Development for any assistance that you may need in the career process. We are here we're here for you. We're here for all of our Mercer students, whether you are an undergrad or continuing education or you're an alumni. Please come and reach out to us. We love speaking with students and helping you in your job endeavors. We do have another question, Kim. How about the best way to negotiate a salary? Do you speak about that in the job interview? Do you kind of wait for maybe the second or third round?
So there's no salary negotiation or even package negotiation until an offer's on the table. So there's no conversation about salary or benefits or perks until there's an offer on the table. So be very careful with that. You must have an offer. After you have an offer, it's customary for people to want to do their homework. It's okay to say, thank you so much for your offer. May I have 1 or 2 or 3 business days to consider your offer? Because that's going to allow you time to do your homework, and you really need to do that. I love payscale.com. There's also a National Association of Colleges and Employers salary calculator that you can use. And again, I know this is a lot to remember. You can come see us. This is really important for our candidates to know what the industry is paying, especially to set our expectations right, but also to make sure that we're going to be paid appropriately. And just today I got in the mail the salary schedule from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. We have those for y'all to look at if you need to see that. That tells us nationwide what the trends are based on disciplines and degree level. But my answer to your question succinctly is do your homework, and there's no negotiation until there's an offer.
And I do have one question that was sent to me privately. How do you know if you're qualified for the job? Like if you've only had an internship experience, how do you know that you actually are qualified to apply for that position?
Your best place to know that is in the job description. And you have to read every single word of the job description, every word. Most candidates that I work with skim that, and I say, let's go back and read everything they're saying. And let's really pay attention to their first mentions and their repeats. If you're careful to look at that, most times that employer has spelled out what is required or minimum qualifications, and what is preferred, or you might see the word desirable. And that helps you to know where you stand. Do I have what they're saying is minimum or required? If they're asking in the minimum category for 5 years of experience at the supervisory level, and you're fresh out and you've not been a supervisor before, maybe you're a career launcher and haven't had that experience yet, and they're saying it's minimum and required, then you're likely not qualified for that job. But there's so many job announcements that will say, we are seeking college graduates, we will train, no previous experience required. Again, you use all of their wording as your clue, and this is so important. I really want you, if you can, to pause after reading that job announcement. Maybe give yourself a scale, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. How qualified am I for this job in my own opinion? Of course, you've got to know that because you've got to make an informed choice here about whether or not to apply. There are many times, though, that I see candidates screen themselves out because they get afraid. Be careful and cautious about that too. If you have 80% or more of what that job announcement's asking for in the minimum, I say go for it. Does that help?
I think that's great advice. Thanks, Kim. All right, at this time, we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar. Again, we want to thank you all for attending today, and please come see the Center for Career and Professional Development for any of your career needs.